Good afternoon. On behalf of the organizing committee of Ophthal 2020 virtual, it's a great privilege and honor to meet all of you virtually. And today I have taken up a very interesting topic of group practice. So basically, over the next 20 minutes, I'll be covering what are the challenges faced in group practices and why is group practice not picking up in India, and how do we make more and more doctors to adapt to the concept of group practice. That would be the focus of my discussion over the next 20 to 25 minutes. Let me just share my screen. So group practice is definitely the way to go. Group practice has been a concept which has been widely discussed. Whenever we meet in professional meetings, we always discuss about group practice. Everybody raves about group practice. But why is it that there are not too many good examples of group practice which has benefited everybody? So, why are there not examples compared to the US or Europe? You see so many group practices, at least 60-70% of the practices there are group practices. While in India, I don't see less than 2% of the practices in ophthalmology or group practices. Though there is a very big perceived list of advantages of group practice, but why is there not so many successful models? Basically, is ophthalmology not suited for group practice? What is it that is preventing us from getting into a group practice model? So let us discuss about this and how do we address all those challenges so that we see more and more group practices coming up in India rather than solo practices. So, as we know, change is the only thing which is very constant, and everything around us is changing at a very fast pace. Right from the society or the nature of medical practices or knowledge, everything keeps changing, and it is important for us also to change. Maybe let's take 20, 25 years ago, an ophthalmologist was able to practice even with very minimal surgical skills or very minimal equipments, and still he was able to develop a good practice, lead a good life of financial freedom and everything. But with the ever increasing demands of the society, right from you see people go to social media and there is a lot of problem demand in terms of people going into Google and searching. So there is a huge demand for us to do more and be more and give more. So how do we actually adapt and do this? The examples of our most successful practitioners in ophthalmology have people who have worked very hard and who have achieved the financial success, clinical success. It is now very difficult for the younger generation even to achieve a small part of that success. So basically, they have to work very hard for the younger generation. So as I said, it's important for us to do more, like do more number of surgeries, see more number of patients, have better technology, better workplaces, but also with less. So basically, we have to do more with less. So how do we do more with less? Meaning less investment, less manpower, because otherwise it's going to be difficult to be financially sustainable. And with the challenges the COVID has posed, lot of young generation ophthalmologists are even thinking of starting up the practices. So group practice is the one of the important and interesting ways to do more with less. So how do we see and let us analyze how do we try to make more and more practices as group practices in India? That's the main idea of this talk over the next 10-15 minutes. So let me begin with the quote with Mother Teresa. So she said, "You can do what I cannot do, and I can do what you cannot do. But together we can do great things." So as ophthalmologists, also this applies to us in a very large way. So individually we can only do minimal things, but when we join together, we can do a lot of great things. I think this is the slide which sums up the entire content of my presentation. So how do we get together to do those great things? So this is a very important slide from the TechCrunch magazine. So you see all these big companies like Uber, Facebook, Alibaba, Airbnb. So Uber has become the world's largest taxi company with zero assets, zero vehicles, and Airbnb is the world's largest accommodation provider with zero real estate. So why is it that we as ophthalmologists keep investing more and more and more on the equipments? The most common complaint I hear from ophthalmologists is that, oh, I've invested. Am I working for these equipment companies? Because whatever I make, I keep repaying for these equipments. So why should we invest more on these equipments and keep working for these equipments? Is there a very viable way to use those equipment, share those equipment? I think group practice is one wonderful way where we don't have to invest individually on these equipment. Let's take an example of the LASIK machine. So we had a meeting around 2 years back about the business of LASIK in Bombay, and it was very interesting to see that almost 90% of the people who own the LASIK machines didn't make returns out of the LASIK machines. So they were actually at a loss considering only the LASIK machine investment. But most of them were actually taking out the money from cataract and the opticals and repaying for the LASIK equipment. So I think group practice is one interesting way where we can reduce this investment on the asset and put the assets to a better use rather than individually investing on those assets. So now I think the economy has become sharing. So we are trying to share everything. Even let's say if you want to go to an international trip, so you don't have to buy those costly cameras because you're not going to use them for more than 10 days or 15 days in a month. So there are websites where you can go and rent those cameras. Even cycles, you don't have to buy those cycles. So you can share. So the economy has become shared. The new generation doesn't want to own anything. They don't want to own big houses. They don't want to own big cars because everything is now available on a sharing economy. So why don't we apply the concept of sharing economy to the ophthalmology industry also? So why should we not share our equipments? Why should we not share our practices? Why should we not share our places? I think that is the concept of the group practice. So coming together as a group definitely has a huge advantage. Basically, the most important complaint which doctors have is I don't have time. I don't have time for vacation. I don't have time for family. I'm not able to take time period off, and I don't have people to share the responsibilities. So I think when we come together as a group, there are lots of advantages, right? From purchase, you get better demanding power when you purchase materials, or even when you want to travel, so there is somebody to take care of your practice. So definitely there is a lot of advantages apart from knowledge sharing. So in a group you can you are able to offer a lot more services to the patients also, rather than just being a cataract surgeon or being a LASIK surgeon. You can form a group with retina surgeons, corneal surgeons, so you can actually provide more number of services to the patients. So I definitely feel coming together as a group has got a lot of advantages and very small disadvantages. So only thing is we have to put our minds to see how we can actually come together as a group. That's the thing which we have to discuss about. So there are various types of group practice models available in India. I did a research on how there are different types of models which are available. So the first model is single owner. So somebody puts up a center and he invites all the other doctors to come and use this equipment. That's called the single owner multiple users model. So basically, if you are a big ophthalmologist, so you can kind of uh, have, if you have the potential to invest for the equipments, you invite others to come and use your facility to do the surgeries or do their investigations. But this model has slight disadvantages which we'll be discussing about. The second model is multiple owners, multiple users. So maybe 10 people invest together to form a common diagnostic center, or they even invest together to form a hospital and then they come and use it together, which is a good model. Some of the leading group practices which are most successful in India have this kind of a model also. And most common thing with the now with the NABH and all these accreditation insurance approvals becoming difficult, many doctors are resorting to the common surgical center model, where only the people practice in different places for the OPD consultation, but come together in a single place for surgery. Interestingly, I've been in Morocco 2 years back, where I don't see any eye hospital or ophthalmologist having his own surgical facility inside the clinic. So say 10, 15 people, they practice individually on a clinical, have their own clinics, but there is a common surgical center which they choose. Mostly these surgical centers are not owned by ophthalmologists. It's like a small general hospital which also provides equipments and infrastructure and investment for the ophthalmology. They even have surgeons who operate. So let's say there is a retinal surgeon who will do the retinal surgeries for you. So very successful model. The ophthalmologists are happy because they don't have these headaches of managing inventory and accreditation and all these things. So that's a very interesting model, I think, which in India also we should explore that kind of a model. There are very many diagnostic centers available in India, where doctors come together to set up only the diagnostic equipment, say OCT or FFA and all these lasers. They put together because it's difficult to invest individually in a common diagnostic center. So basically, the model of a diagnostic center also combined with the surgical center and LASIK center works very well. I think the most successful is the common LASIK center, because LASIK equipment is highly unaffordable for individual ophthalmologists to buy. So there are many common LASIK centers which are come all over India. So basically, people bring in the patients to get the surgery done there. So very successful model. And the center survives easily if there are 20, 30 doctors who can get the patients to operate that. It's beneficial for the center owner also, and also for the individual ophthalmologist going and operating in these centers. So these are the most common models of group practice which I have seen operating in India. We will discuss individually about each of these models. So, what are the common pain points? Why is group practice not picking up? Basically, most of the group practices are formed by doctors, and doctors have in equal level of knowledge, and we are also thinking each other as competitors. So in India, the group practice mostly is not working because first thing is there is not a good structuring of the group. So the first thing we have to do is structure the group practice, documentation, and whether we are able to exit clauses. Even I think even when you form a group, most of the time we don't discuss about exit. So thinking that, oh, we are friends, how will it? We are not going to exit. But I think the first thing to discuss in a group practice is what happens if you are going to exit. So what you get. So I think structuring is the most important point when you start a group practice. And second thing is, most of these group practice are run by individual ophthalmologists. So and ophthalmologists don't have any. We are not trained as business professionals. So we have this lack of business understanding. So basically, we have to employ people with business background to administer the group, rather than we trying to administer it ourselves. So get people who have the administrative backup and a financial background to kind of run the group practice, rather than we trying to do the administrative part. I feel ophthalmologists should focus on the clinical part and get administrative people, business people to run the group, which is the common model followed in the US and Europe. And most important, there are also patient-related issues. Sometimes patient is not willing to travel, and most of the time we are all having this concept that I should provide everything under the roof, otherwise my patient may not go. And sometimes the other thing is, you refer a patient, the patient doesn't go there, and you don't know what happened to the patient. So there are lots of these patient related issues which we have to think over and sort out in a group practice. And I also think that the most important thing when you refer to a single owner group practice, where somebody else owns the practice and then you send the patient there, there is a lot of trust and transparency issues. You are always afraid whether the patient will go to that particular doctor or will that doctor take away my patient. So that is also important to address. So unless I think most of the group practices fail because there is lack of this trust and transparency. And as I said before, most of the groups are not run by professional peoples, professional business people, I mean, and there is a non-professional administration of the group, which leads to collapse of the group practice. Other problem which I commonly see is there is no long-term goals, because we don't think that what will happen to the group practice after you, and is it going to, how do you exit, or what happens if something happens to you, and what is the kind of share your people will get, or how do you sell the stake of yourself into from the group to another doctor. I think that we have to define what is the long term goal for this group. Is it going to establish more such group practices, or are you planning to add up a LASIK equipment, or all those things we have to decide initially, so that if you have a long term goal, it is easy to kind of reach and work towards that goal. I think the last point is the most important one. Most of the group practices fail because of ego among doctors. So basically, we have this ego, and whether we think, why is he giving me this thing, and why should he dominate over me, or why should he be dictating terms to me, and all those ego. I think we have to let go of these egos if we have to sustain as a group practice. So most of the successful group practices I've seen are within friends. So maybe they are of the same age group, or they are from the same college, so or same relationship, same locality, and these kind of things. So these, so in addition to the financial, so the chemistry between the people who are forming the part of the group is also very important. I think that will help solve all those issues due to ego. I think I've fairly covered what are all the common problems because of which many of the group practices dissolve. So, if you're able to address each of these points, I think we will see more and more group practices coming in India in the coming years. So this is one of the group practice medical centers in Mumbai, which recently closed. So we are not only concerned about not too many group practices coming, even the practices which are existing are closing up. So I think we have to be very worried about these kind of situations, because we are not going in the right direction when already existing centers are closing down. So we have to see to that, how do we start more and more of these group practice centers, and also sustain the centers which are already existing. Because most of the equipments which we invest in an individual practice doesn't give us the return of the capital employed. We call it as ROCE in financial terms. So let's say you buy an OCT, or you buy a field machine, or you buy an equipment which is worth 10, 20 lakhs. So is it giving you the returns within the first 4, 5 years time? So most of the time it doesn't give us the return. So it makes a lot of sense to buy these equipments as a group. So basically, we should not allow centers to close down. Rather than, we should try to see how we create more and more group practice centers. So, what are the rules for success of a group practice? How do we see that a group practice succeeds? So, first thing is write a written business plan for the group. So, we as doctors should at least have a plan. So, what is going to be the group like? How many people? What is the structure of this company? And what is the share of each person? And the partnership should be documented. So, most of the time, group practices don't survive because there is no proper documentation. So we have to involve professional people like a good lawyer and a good chartered accountant to create the documentation, rather than trying to create a small partnership deed on our own. So when we have a meticulous document, this should be the document which will guide the group over the next 20, 30 years. So even after us, there should be documentation of how the group has to work, and how the revenues are shared and all those things. So we need to have very clear documentation of the partnership. The second point is the most important point. We have to pick up the right partners and remove the wrong partners. Basically, because the group is nothing but the people in the group, the partners in the group. So if we have wrong partners, we should also have methodology to remove them as quickly as possible. And selecting right partners, maybe select them with from your own background or a similar college, or most of the groups which succeed are because of people who are selecting the right partners. And have a strong administrator, preferably somebody with a good experience in the eye care industry and administrative knowledge to administer the group. Most important point for collapse of the group practice is not sharing profits fairly and equally. I think it has to be a very clear system where all the profits are shared equally and fairly among all the partners of the group. And communication, have regular board meetings and follow written norms for decision making. Basically, we form the group but we don't meet regularly, so at least once in a month or once in 2 months, I think the group has to meet, review the progress of the past 2 3 months, and then discuss plans for the future. So that is very important. The communication part has to be happening regularly. And most important is to have a good exit plan. When you want to exit, what is the strategy? And is somebody, if he wants to exit the group, what is he going to get? How is he going to be financially remunerated? Also see to that his exit doesn't harm the group also. So you should have a good exit plan. That is important in a group practice. Most important is, as a group you all work together, but I think we should also play together. Like the most successful group practices are also people who become, because you're going to work together, spend most of your life on working together, maybe then playing together, meaning your families become close and you take vacations and you also play together. That binds the group together for a longer duration. I think it's important to work together and also to play together. So these are some of the common points which I think are good for creating a very successful group practice. So one of the most successful models, so what is the group, workable group practice model? So I feel there should be a model where there is an equal investment, equal stake, equal work, and equal share. This is the idealistic situation where you have equal investment, you have equal stake. Let's say there are 4 people, they invest equally, they have 25% stake, and they work equally, and they share the profits equally. So most of the groups also have problem when they have a fee share or revenue share model. So if this kind of a model can be worked out, I'm sure you can have your own permutation combination. But some of the successful groups I've seen have followed this model where the investment is equal, the stake is equal, and they also work equally and share the profits equally. So this kind of a model is a very idealistic situation which is workable. So apart from that, what are the some? I thought there are some other group practice models which can be explored by ophthalmologists. So basically, there are lots of these corporate hospitals willing to invest for ophthalmology facility, like even including a LASIK center and everything. But only thing is, corporate hospital doesn't have the doctor base to use those equipments. So if you form a group of say 10, 20, 30 people in your city or a town, and then you approach a corporate hospital, I'm sure the corporate hospital, if you guarantee them numbers of patients, they would be willing to invest for the group in terms of equipments and the OT facilities. Also, another model, most of the lab chains invest heavily for an MRI or a CT scan. So maybe we can also form a group and ask the lab chains to set up the OCT and other diagnostic facilities for a group of ophthalmologists. I think that model will also definitely work. So, but only thing is they need the number of ophthalmologists. So if you have a group of doctors, you can approach a lab chain to set up the ophthalmology diagnostic facility for you. The third model I feel which would work is a mobile diagnostic or a LASIK facility, because now the roads have become improved in India. So a group of 8, 10 doctors can invest for a mobile a diagnostic facility which can go to individual clinics and help the patients get the treatment. And because the most common problem when you refer a patient to a group practice is patient doesn't go there, and the distance of travel and all those things. So if you can set up a mobile facility where all those equipments are available, I think a group of 8-10 doctors can join together to start a mobile diagnostic facility. So we can even invite the equipment companies. See, now because of the COVID, most of the trade is not able to sell equipment. So we can invite the equipment companies to set up those common facilities, like a common LASIK center and or a common even in a small tier 2 kind of a town. I think the companies will be willing to set up those facilities because doctors are not able to buy those equipments individually. And I also strongly feel that the associations like AOS or the ophthalmic associations can set up the group practice centers for ophthalmologists. Basically, because they have the surplus capital corpus fund which they can explore to set up these group practice facilities. This will be, when backed up by an association, I feel the group practice would be a very interesting and a very neutral and transparent kind of a practice for the doctors. A lot of senior ophthalmologists also are looking at opportunities to invest. So, because they have this excess capital with them, maybe a senior ophthalmologist can invest for a group practice of young ophthalmologists. So that would be a very nice model. So I've seen one such model in Nellore, where a senior ophthalmologist has set up the group practice for at least 7, 8 younger generation ophthalmologists. So they have started centers in different coastal towns of Andhra Pradesh, where the senior ophthalmologists invest 50%, and then the younger generation ophthalmologists invest the rest. And it has scaled up to be a very good group practice, one of the most successful group practice models seen in India. So this is something like we have actually tied up with one of the common. This is a facility which is a daycare facility where we have started a group practice Chennai in one of these hospitals where all the equipments investigations are done. So this is a fully equipped facility which is now open up for ophthalmologists all over Chennai to come and use. So maybe this model can be replicated in other cities also, so that people can don't have to invest a lot of money on equipments. So mobile diagnostic units, there are even mobile units internationally for macular screening, or there are even dry eye mobile units. So we maybe in India it's not possible to set up this trailer kind of a facility, but I think still we can set up a mobile diagnostic unit formed by 10-20 ophthalmologists, which can go to the individual ophthalmologist clinic for diagnostic and treatment processes. Even I think definitely in future mobile LASIK model would be coming in India. So that's going to be one of the most successful models. Basically, if the LASIK machine comes to your center, I think there's nothing better than that. So this is the mobile dry eye unit in one of the European countries, only testing for dry eye. So this is another mobile unit, I think focusing more on the refraction and glasses part. So some of the most successful models like the group practice LASIK center in Bangalore, and then I was telling you about the Nellore hospital, eye hospital in Nellore, which has started multiple centers as a group of ophthalmologists. And internationally, there are many group practices which have become very successful. So just before I complete my presentation, I'd like to talk about this concept of jumping the curve. So basically, this is you can see this blue colored curve. Every business goes into this initially when you start a practice, you keep climbing up, and then after a period of say 10-20 years, so your practice stagnates. So most common complaint which I hear is my practice is not growing after 20 years, because initially most of the businesses will go towards the upward slope, and then there is a stagnation where there is a plateauing down. And if we don't take steps to jump this curve, like you see this S-shaped curve coming up, it becomes difficult, and then the practice might slowly go down. I see many of these ophthalmic practices in India going through this classical bell-shaped curve, initially climbing up, then plateauing and coming down. So an ophthalmologist keeps practicing, and then if his children are coming into the practice, then for him at least he is able to retain the practice. But what happens if the children are not ophthalmologists? Is the practice keeps dipping down. So one way to jump the curve is by converting your practice into a group practice after a particular point of time. So that's how I think most of the practices should think. So maybe is group practice one way to jump the curve. So most this phenomenon of this jumping the curve is not only it's seen in every business. Let's say a business like the ice industry. So people were actually cutting ices from the frozen rivers long back. Then when the refrigerators came where people could make their own ice, then there was the ice factories where the factories used to sell the ice cubes. So basically, the ice cutters then jumped the curve to become ice factories. And the ice factories actually started dipping down when the refrigerators came in, where people are able to make ice in their own homes. So if the ice cutters had become ice factories, or if the ice factories had jumped the curve to become the refrigerator manufacturer, I think those businesses should have sustained. So in ophthalmology also, I think we should see whether making our practice into a group is kind of something to help us jump the curve. That's the point which I wanted to drive. So I sincerely feel that in India there should be lots of group practices which are coming up over the next few generations. Maybe in the next 5 years, 10 years, definitely. I'm sure there are lots of group practices going to come in, and uh, if you want to learn more about group practice, or if you need assistance in setting up group practice, please do communicate with me, and these are my contact numbers. And thank you for your patient hearing, and I hope this presentation was helpful for all of you. Please keep watching the space we are for Ophthall, where we are actually planning to do a lot more activities for ophthalmologists, and register to become our OPD club member. And I'm sure you're a part of a WhatsApp group, the Ophthalmic Practice Development WhatsApp group. And if you're not yet a part, please join immediately, and let us all discuss and share knowledge to grow together. Thank you for your patient hearing.